All right. Well, I made a promise that I was going to share some of the books that I have in my library. Now, I've been collecting books since I was in high school. Actually, a little bit before then, but seriously, since I was in high school. And through the years, that's decades ago, so I've built up a sizable collection, a decent collection. And it's also very broad in terms of the things that I like, and like I'll have like guys like this, J.C. Leyendecker. I'll get into in a moment. He's an illustrator. Norman Rockwell, Dean Cornwell, Albert Dorn, different illustrators. Excuse me. And I'll also have fine artists: Rembrandt, Sargent, Velasquez, Sorolla, and on and on. Just a broad range, and as well as I have different interests. I'll have books on painting. I'll have books on watercolor. I'll have books on pen and ink. I'll also have books on animation. Those what do you call it? The art of Disney books and stuff like that. A few books on digital artists. I'm been mostly a traditional artist, and I still consider myself a traditional artist, although I do a lot of digital art. But you know, it's just a broad range of interests that I have, and so with that, it's hard to pick out exactly where to start from. There's a lot of books that I have. So I figured I'd start from one of my favorites, artist named J.C. Leyendecker. If you are not familiar with J.C. Leyendecker was a generation before Norman Rockwell. And he was a big influence on Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell even mentioned it in his book, My Adventures as an Illustrator, and talked about J.C. Leyendecker and his brother Frank Xavier Leyendecker, who were both illustrators and really big in their day. They were, I believe, probably the highest paid illustrators of their day. He was very famous for not only his Saturday Evening Post covers, but also his advertisements, which included the arrow collar and different illustrations that he did for different advertising companies. But he was also an artist who went to France and trained in the classical tradition. Now, if you look at his work is very stylized. What I do enjoy about his work is that there doesn't seem to be a wasted brushstroke on his canvas. Everything gives it life. Everything has a purpose for being there, and it just to me, his work looks flawless. But you know, he worked very hard at his paintings, even though it doesn't seem like it. Now, again, this is one of my favorite books, and he was a part of the Saturday Evening Post for a very long time, and one of the for a while after, you know, just shortly before his death and after his death, he kind of was forgotten about. And the reason why, one of the reasons why, is that his work was so associated with the Post, with the Saturday Evening Post. When the Post decided to make a change, that they dropped him. So he got dropped. That was one of his major clients. So he was dropped off the Saturday Evening Post. These are some of the artists around his time, of course, not around his time, but well, some of them. Yeah, Rockwell visited him as a young illustrator. This is Norman Rockwell. This is James Montgomery Flagg, and of course N.C. Wyeth. But the Saturday Evening Post dropped him, and he began to lose major clients. He was still illustrating, but he wasn't gaining the money that he was before. And one of the problems with that is that he always lived beyond his means. So he wasn't able to maintain the living that he had before. He lived in a mansion. You know, he was very, very, very well off. So this is his early stuff. Now, again, he's like I said, he's classically trained. Him and his brother both went to Paris and trained there. This is work done by his brother. Now, his brother was also a terrific illustrator. Not as popular as J.C. Leyendecker, and as a matter of fact, his brother had fallen on hard times before J.C. Leyendecker. They lived together, but in order to maintain the pace in which both of them were working at, his brother Frank Xavier had to, well, not had to, but he decided to use drugs and so forth, and his health and everything began to decline afterwards. And as a matter of fact, don't know which ones, but J.C. Leyendecker had to help pitch in and help him to finish some of his work in order to meet his deadlines. Now, this, you might be familiar with this painting. This is one of his arrow collar illustrations, and you see this imitated a lot. Some people like to use the word homage, but you know, it's been used. And now his style, his painting was like from the early 1900s into the 1920s and so forth. So it's another terrific illustration. It's just like all this design work right here, and how everything is just, every brushstroke is just in the right place. So anyway, let's get to some of the bigger pictures here. I love these canvases, and these canvases, these are his sketch canvases, and before he goes to work on the finished, and you see this looks very finished already, but he works out how he's going to solve the problem. It's like, here's the guy's face, here it is again, and you see the changes that he makes in them, and how he does the legs, and works it out so that he has an idea that when he goes to paint, he knows exactly what he's going to do. And to me, that's what comes across as making it look as though it looks both very spontaneous and also very I mean, just I don't know what the right word is, but it's just that, you know, like everything, every stroke has seemed to have had a purpose. So again, going out of this is one of his finished illustrations here, and all these, I guess you can see this one much better. It's a beautifully done illustration. All this lace is worked out, and it doesn't seem like overworked. It just, you can see brush strokes and just so confident. So, well, this is a big, I think this is probably an arrow collar advertisement. I believe these arrow collars are just collars that you can attach on any shirt to make sure that that collar looks pristine, you know. And this is another arrow collar advertisement. This is what was on the detail that was on the cover. Again, arrow collar, all of these, I guess. Oh, this is House of Kuppenheimer, and this is the same arrow, of course. So those are all, these are his advertising illustrations that you're seeing right here. Excuse me if I'm flipping through this quick. I do want to show another book, and not just this book, but just to give you an idea of the incredible These are his Saturday Evening Post covers, and he started from when I believe. Let me see if I can get the first. Yeah, there were no color. There was no color on when he started, and then they did like I think they added red, and so it was black and white and red was the colors that they used, and then eventually they got to full color. So he was around that time where it kind of transitioned. See, this kind of wonderful illustration. It's similar to what you would see in Norman Rockwell, and you'd see where Norman Rockwell gets that inspiration from. This was the man he was watching, although his stuff was a lot more decorative. Leyendecker stuff is a lot more decorative, but definitely along those veins. These are all, like I said, Saturday Evening Post covers. Typical type of what became later known as Rockwell stuff, but this was all before Rockwell. Don't know what to say other than that about how great this guy's work is, but these are, of course, the other magazines he worked for: Collier's, it's Judge, Literary Digest, and so forth. Whoops. Some of these magazines I've never heard of. American Weekly, yeah, I've heard of that. So these are some of his book illustrations, and I think this book has it by category as far as advertising, magazine, and book illustration. So some of these might be earlier than some of the other stuff that I've shown before. So these everyone did these army posters back then. And well, anyway, this book not only has great reproductions, it is a great read as well, and I highly recommend it. And let me put this away, and I want to just keeping up with what's current. This is my new book. Well, not my book, but a book that I bought recently on the art of Harry Anderson. Now, I have not learned about Harry Anderson until about a few years ago. And the thing that I was amazed by him, first of all, he's a great illustrator, but his work is done not in oil paintings like most of the illustrators used at the time, but his work was done in casein, which I had started using. So this kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities that the medium has. But this is a new book. I haven't even finished going through it, but you can see how very much this looks like an oil. I like the fact that they show some of his reference photos, and some of them you can see where he made his changes and not use the photo directly, that some people, these are his personal works, like some people use use a photo as a kind of a how you say, people just become Xerox machines, copy machines, and just copy the photo rather than using the photo as reference. He did a lot of religious work, and here are his advertising. These I think are these are advertising or calendar illustrations. One of the two. These are, again, advertising. Did a lot of these. I believe these are calendar illustrations. All done in casein. I think that he had developed a kind of allergy to the oil paints or the solvents or something, so he could not use oils, and I think he used it very early on in his career. But he switched to casein at some point. Now, I think a lot of artists back then used both casein and gouache. This is, again, it's a reference photo. This is his son who posed for the photo. He is posing for this photo of a painting he did as Winslow Homer. So, really great stuff. I enjoyed this book. I'm so glad I got this book. Now, I'll leave a link to these books. This book I got from the same publisher, the Illustrated Press, who puts out Illustration Magazine, which is a terrific magazine. It's a quarterly magazine filled with the great stuff from illustrators of the past. And the thing about this publisher is that they sell out quickly. Their books and their magazines are excellent quality, great reproductions. They either get the reproductions from the original painting, or they use sources like there's some auction house where they'll use the Heritage Auction, I believe, is one of the auction houses that provides them with some of the images from some of the paintings that they auction off. Now, I'm trying to get to this one terrific painting that I really, this is terrific. I mean, half the size you see, he's a young man, he's an older man, and it's just nicely painted. Again, here you can see the difference between his reference photo and what it ended up with. And there's one, and I'll look for this one before I close out this book. This is really great stuff. One of here it is. One of my happiest purchases. Now, I love this painting. They're just so well painted, so rich in color and rich in like kind of like buttery brushstrokes. It really looks like oil painting to me, and not a lot like casein or a water-based paint, but nicely painted. You know, I really can't say enough about this illustration. I love this one a great deal. So, and this too, love how he got into all this white here, and how you see it's white. This is a lot like one of my instructors has explained Soroya to me in a similar situation where you see that the what he painted was a white garment, and over here it's a white blanket, and it's obviously white, but when you look at it, there's a lot of color in there. It's not just white. You know, you see some purples, you see, and it's, you know, the bounce light from other places in the room. Some warms and some cools and so forth. Again. So, this is a great purchase. I'm very happy with it. Again, this is Harry Anderson. I'll leave a link to these books. So, lastly, I wanted to talk about this book, which I often talk about a lot. And this is a book called The Art Spirit. Now, there are no pictures in here, but it's a book that was written by the students of this artist named Robert Henri, and he taught at the Art Students League, I believe. And what they did was they collected and put into books quotes, speeches, critiques, whatever, by this this artist who was very, very inspirational. He was a great teacher, And so it's all about thinking about art and thinking about yourself as an artist and the things that you want to accomplish. And he's very good at what he says. I've had this book, not this particular book, but I've always had a copy of this book since high school. And it is probably the most valuable book that I have. And I like to go into it every now and then, just for inspiration's sake. The ideas he talked about in here. Here it says, notes, articles, fragments of letters, and talks to students bearing on the concept and technique of picture making, the study of art generally, and on appreciation. And it gives you a little introduction of his life, who he was, and he wrote a foreword because this was published in his lifetime. I just think he's just a terrific and inspiring teacher. And I'll just read this brief quote. There are moments in our lives, there are moments in the day when we seem to see beyond the usual. Such are the moments of our greatest happiness, such are the moments of our greatest wisdom. If one could but recall his vision by some sort of sign, it was in this hope that the arts were invented. Signposts on the way to what may be, signposts towards greater knowledge. And this is Robert Henri. I can't say enough about this book. Every artist should have a copy of this book, no matter what discipline you're into. Whether you're an oil painter, whether you are digital artist, watercolorist, if you're into picture making, if you're into making art, then this is the book of to help you to think in that mode in terms of being an artist and living like an artist and thinking like an artist and so forth. I cannot recommend any book more. So again, this is 3 books. I have a ton of books. Let me know your opinion. Let me know what you think. Let me know if this video was interesting. Hit like if that's the case. Leave some comments and so forth. If you want to see more, let me know. I got a ton of books. If you want this presented in a different way, I'm happy to do it. I love this stuff. I love collecting books on art, and I don't mind sharing it at all. Again, I will leave the links, and I will be back soon with another video. Bye-bye.